Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell stepped off the C-130 transport plane onto American soil for the first time in 14 months. The bright Virginia sun felt foreign after the dust-filled skies of Afghanistan. 3 tours, countless missions, and a body that carried more than just memories of war. She adjusted her uniform, wincing as the fabric brushed against her side, where the shrapnel lay buried beneath scarred skin. Fort Bragg was supposed to be her respite, a chance to serve stateside while the military doctors figured out how to remove the metal fragments that had become unwelcome passengers in her body since the ambush outside Kandahar. The pain was manageable most days, a dull reminder of the 5 soldiers she dragged to safety before the second IED hit. The official report listed her injuries as non-critical, a bureaucratic designation that meant she was expected to perform all duties without accommodation. Sarah reported to her new commanding officer, with her medical file tucked under her arm. The name on the door read Colonel William Prescott, and his reputation had preceded him. 20 years as a Navy SEAL, 8 combat deployments, and a Medal of Honor recipient who transformed into the military's most demanding training officer. They called him Iron Will for his uncompromising standards and zero-tolerance policy for weakness. "Lieutenant Mitchell, reporting for duty, sir," she announced, standing at attention despite the fire igniting along her ribs. Colonel Prescott barely looked up from his desk. "Mitchell, combat medic, Afghanistan. It says here you're fit for full duty." "Yes, sir. Though I do have some medical documentation regarding—" "Save it, Lieutenant. I've got 300 soldiers who all think they're special cases." He closed her file. "PT formation at 0500 tomorrow. Full pack, 10-mile course." Sarah swallowed hard. "Understood, sir." The barracks were quiet as she unpacked, most of the unit out on training exercises. She carefully removed the prescription bottles from her bag, pain management that the doctors insisted was temporary until surgery could be scheduled. The X-ray images showed what the human eye couldn't see: 17 metal fragments scattered throughout her left side, 3 dangerously close to her spine, another near her kidney. That night, she lay awake, rehearsing how to approach the colonel again. Her previous commanding officer had understood, had seen firsthand what happened in that valley. But here, she was just another soldier with a file that didn't tell the whole story. Morning came too quickly. The pre-dawn air was thick with humidity as 200 soldiers assembled on the parade ground. Sarah took her place in formation, the weight of her pack already sending warning signals through her nervous system. Colonel Prescott paced before them, his voice carrying across the field. "Welcome to the real military, people. Out there, the enemy doesn't care about your feelings, your comfort, or your excuses. Neither do I." 3 miles into the run, Sarah felt the familiar warmth of blood seeping through her shirt. One of the fragments had shifted. She gritted her teeth, falling back in the formation. By mile 5, her vision was tunneling, each footfall sending shockwaves through her body. "Colonel," she gasped, approaching Colonel, who was observing from the sideline. "Request permission to report to medical, sir." His eyes narrowed. "Giving up already, Lieutenant?" "No, sir, but I have a medical condition." "A medical condition?" he scoffed, loud enough for nearby runners to hear this. "Did you hear that, everyone? Lieutenant Mitchell has a condition." His face hardened. "Get lost, bitch. Either keep up or get out of my unit." Sarah stood frozen, the colonel's words hanging in the humid air. Behind his shoulder, she could see other soldiers watching, some with sympathy, others with the cruel curiosity of those witnessing someone else's humiliation. What none of them could see was the blood now soaking through her PT shirt and the battle raging inside her between military discipline and self-preservation. Sarah's humiliation at the PT test became the talk of the base. Whispers followed her through the mess hall, training facilities, and barracks. Prescott's latest victim, they called her. The colonel had made an example of her, and now she faced a choice: reveal her wounds and risk being medically discharged, or endure the pain and prove herself. She chose the latter, swallowing extra pain medication before each training session. During tactical exercises, she bit her lip until it bled when the shrapnel shifted. At night, she cleaned the reopened wounds in private, using supply sheets smuggled from the medical bay. The base doctor, Captain Reynolds, noticed her pallor and offered to review her case, but Sarah refused. "I need to do this on my own terms," she insisted. 3 weeks into her assignment, the bleeding worsened. After a particularly grueling obstacle course, Sarah locked herself in a bathroom stall and examined the damage. The largest fragment had migrated closer to the surface, creating an angry red protrusion beneath her skin. Infection was setting in. She had perhaps days before sepsis became a real possibility. That evening, Colonel Prescott announced a surprise night exercise, a full-gear march followed by a water crossing. "This separates the warriors from the wannabes," he declared, his eyes finding Sarah in the formation. The rain came down in sheets as they trudged through mud that pulled at their boots like hungry mouths. Sarah's fever spiked, her uniform soaked with both rain and blood. Halfway through the exercise, Lieutenant Rodriguez slipped down a ravine, his ankle twisting with a sickening crack. Without thinking, Sarah broke formation and scrambled down to him, her medic training taking over. "Mitchell, get back in line," Prescott's voice boomed through the darkness. "He needs medical attention, sir," she called back, already splinting Rodriguez's ankle with branches and torn fabric from her own uniform. "I gave you an order, Lieutenant." Sarah looked up at the colonel, rain streaming down her face, mixing with tears of pain and frustration. "With respect, sir, I took an oath to never leave a falling comrade." The colonel's face contorted with rage. He slid down the ravine, grabbing Sarah by her collar. "You think you're special? You think your service gives you the right to disobey direct orders?" The sudden movement tore open Sarah's wound completely. She gasped, doubling over as fresh blood soaked through her uniform, visible even in the dim light of tactical flashlights. "What the hell?" Prescott stepped back, confusion replacing anger. Rodriguez stared wide-eyed at the blood. "Sarah, you're hurt bad." "It's nothing," she managed, trying to straighten up, but her legs buckled. Sergeant Major Dodson, a veteran of 3 wars who served as Prescott's right-hand man, knelt beside her. "This isn't fresh, sir. These are shrapnel wounds, and they've been bleeding for some time." Prescott's expression hardened again. "If you're injured, why isn't it in your file? Why haven't you reported to medical?" "It is in my file," Sarah said, through gritted teeth. "Page 6, under non-critical injuries. 17 metal fragments from an IED in Kandahar. I was supposed to have surgery, but got transferred here instead." "Non-critical?" Dodson examined the wound. "This is inches from your kidney." "The mission was classified," Sarah whispered, her strength fading. "The full extent of injuries couldn't be documented without compromising operational security." Prescott ordered an immediate evacuation. As they carried Sarah and Rodriguez back to base, the colonel remained silent, his face unreadable in the darkness. The other soldiers exchanged glances. They'd never seen anyone stand up to Prescott like that, especially not while bleeding out. Back at base, the doctor confirmed Sarah's condition was critical. The infection had spread and emergency surgery was required. As they wheeled her toward the operating room, Prescott appeared in the hallway. His expression still stern, but somehow different. "Why didn't you tell me how bad it was?" he demanded. Sarah looked him straight in the eye, her voice weak but resolute. "Because you told me to get lost, sir, and I was raised to follow orders." 3 days after emergency surgery, Sarah woke in the base hospital to find her bed surrounded by flowers and cards from her unit. The doctors had removed 14 of the 17 shrapnel fragments. The remaining 3 would require specialized surgery at Walter Reed. Captain Reynolds informed her that she'd nearly died from septic shock. Her stubborn determination to prove herself had almost cost her everything. Word of what happened spread quickly through Fort Bragg. The story evolved with each telling. how Lieutenant Mitchell had carried shrapnel for months without complaint, how she'd broken formation to save Rodriguez despite her own critical condition, how she'd stood up to the infamous Colonel Prescott while bleeding out. In the barracks, mess hall, and training grounds, Sarah unwittingly became a symbol of quiet courage. Colonel Prescott was conspicuously absent during her recovery. Sergeant Major Dawson visited daily, bringing updates and, occasionally, apologies on the colonel's behalf. "He's reviewing your full service record," Dawson explained. "The classified parts required special clearance." 2 weeks later, Fort Bragg prepared for its annual Military Excellence Ceremony. General Janet Wolfenberger, the first female four-star general in the Air Force, would be attending to present commendations. Sarah, still weak but determined, received permission to attend in a wheelchair. The ceremony proceeded with typical military precision. Awards for marksmanship, leadership, and service presented under the bright lights of the base auditorium. Sarah sat in the back row, uncomfortable with the occasional glances and whispers directed her way. Then Colonel Prescott took the podium, his face solemn. "Before we conclude today's ceremony, I have an unscheduled presentation." He paused, scanning the crowd until his eyes found Sarah. "Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, please come forward." A fellow soldier wheeled her to the front as murmurs rippled through the audience. General Wolfenberger stood beside Prescott, her expression unreadable. "3 weeks ago," Prescott began, his voice carrying through the silent auditorium, "I made a grievous error in judgment. I dismissed a soldier's pain because I couldn't see her wounds." He turned to face Sarah directly. "Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell's full service record has now been declassified for the ceremony. During Operation Mountain Shadow, Lieutenant Mitchell's medical unit was ambushed. After their vehicle was hit by an IED, she extracted 5 wounded soldiers under heavy fire." The colonel continued, recounting details that had been absent from her official file, how she'd used her own body to shield a wounded comrade when a second explosion hit, how she'd continued treating casualties despite her own injuries, how she'd refused evacuation until all her patients were stable. The shrapnel she carried wasn't just metal. It was a testament to the highest traditions of military service and sacrifice. General Wolfenberger stepped forward, opening a small box. Inside gleamed the Silver Star, one of the nation's highest decorations for valor in combat. "For gallantry and action against enemies of the United States," the general announced, pinning the medal to Sarah's hospital gown as protocol gave way to necessity. After the ceremony, Colonel Prescott approached Sarah privately. The hardness in his eyes had been replaced by something else. Respect, perhaps even regret. "I owe you more than an apology, Lieutenant," he said quietly. "I failed you as a commanding officer." Sarah looked up at him. "Permission to speak freely, sir." He nodded. "We all carry wounds from war. Some are just more visible than others." The following month, Fort Bragg implemented new medical screening protocols, personally overseen by Colonel Prescott. Sarah's case became required reading for all incoming officers, a lesson in the invisible costs of combat and the danger of assumptions. As she prepared for her transfer to Walter Reed, she received one final visitor, Rodriguez, now walking with a cane, his ankle healing well. "You saved my career that night," he said, "but the story everyone's telling is how you changed the colonel. They say Iron Wolf finally found something stronger than himself." Sarah smiled, touching the Silver Star now properly affixed to her uniform. "Sometimes the greatest battles we fight aren't against the enemy. They're against the silence that hides our pain." When she left Fort Bragg, a formation of soldiers stood at attention along the roadway, a silent tribute to the woman who had taught one of the military's toughest commanders that true strength isn't measured by the absence of weakness, but by the courage to reveal it when it matters most.